Welcome to GTC's Teaching Tidbits. Each episode, we explore a teaching technique, tip, practice, or idea from faculty for faculty. In our current set of episodes, we are focusing on teaching hybrid blended courses. And today we have joining us from Culinary, Chef Kristen Grissom. Welcome, Chef.
Thank you.
We are glad to have you here today. Would you share with us a little bit about your background and the format or formats in which you've taught?
Absolutely. So I've been with Greenville Tech since August of 2012. So it's been about a little over 8 years now. Of course, Culinary, we teach mostly lab courses, very hands-on courses. We do some hybrid blended courses and we do some online lecture. But of course, with the COVID shutdown, our biggest challenge was to take our hands-on labs and make them blended or completely online courses. So we had a very large challenge handed to us, and our staff has been phenomenal here. Our faculty has been great, trying to keep our students moving forward with all of the restrictions and certainly during the entire shutdown.
Yes, and I heard you speak for PD Day, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to get you on here because we got to hear on PD Day a little bit about all of those adjustments that you've had to make. So I'm excited for you to share your tidbits today. As with every department, Chef Kristen just shared, Culinary was met with quite a challenge when we had to move from to fully online and hybrid blended modes of learning. And I'm excited for you to hear about the creative ways they've taken hands-on, face-to-face learning and adapted that into new formats. So, Chef Kristen, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your teaching tidbits.
All right. So Culinary online, obviously a challenge because we are very hands-on. We're tasting food. We're guiding students through specific cooking techniques. I know a lot of our programs here at Greenville Tech are also extremely hands-on, and we were all handed a huge challenge with COVID. So the one thing that we adopted in our program was Semper Gumby. And Semper Gumby has become our motto here, and that means always flexible. So all of my military Semper Fi people will recognize this one. So anytime it's something that just seems overwhelming, it's like, you know what, Semper Gumby. We're going to back up for a second and we're going to focus on what we can do. Because when you think about what you can't do all the time, it can get very overwhelming. So let's stop for a second and let's Semper Gumby it and figure out what we can do with the situation, because there's always something we can do. So we had to look at all of the different paths to success that we had, and thankfully we've got the internet. Thankfully, we've got technology. We've been forced to learn a lot very, very quickly, I think, like most of us have. So we started looking at these different pathways to success with virtual classes, flipped classrooms, and then seeing what students can do from their mobile devices. So they all have them. We're constantly telling them to put them away in lab. So now we're asking them to take them out and use them. So it's actually worked pretty well. So one of the things that we did when we were allowed to have students back in, we were limited in our classrooms, and we had A groups, B groups. We had to limit the number of students who were in there. So we started looking at what we could do with each group and what they could do on their own. And normally we would do that all in the same lab. But this time we really had to kind of put the onus on the student that you need to follow along, and here's how you can do it. But this is what we absolutely want you to do in the class with us. So we focused on preparation for class. What do you need to do ahead of time to get ready? We focused on organizing like a chef. We do something called mise en place, which means everything in its place. So we have students organize ahead of time and we grade that organization. How can we assess learning when they're not there? Certainly, we have looked into all sorts of different video mediums, and we've looked into more written assignments for them. And then, of course, we can always reinforce that learning afterward. Not everything has to be demonstrated in the lab. So what we focused on completely was creating and closing a student loop. So we're all familiar with the, introduce, reinforce, assess cycle of student learning, and we want to create and reinforce and close that loop during what now is a very different classroom. So we broke everything down to core competencies. We introduced that topic, we demonstrated that topic, and the demonstration does not have to be done in person. We used GoPros, we used webcams, we used iPhones, we used all kinds of things. Blackboard Collaborate has been a great tool for us. We can demonstrate it, and that way the students can even go back and they can watch the demonstration again. So they're not just stuck one time seeing the demonstration, they can see it over and over and over. We created a primary activity that they could do in the lab for the short time that we had them, and then reinforcement activities they could do outside of the lab. So we might do one in-class activity and then send them home with a packet of food and recipes, and they would perform those skills in their home kitchen. And the nice thing about that is they got to feed their families. So we may send them home with a pork tenderloin and have them remove the silver skin, sear it, and then cook it to medium rare. Well, we can assess that virtually because it's not all about flavor at that point. You can do a lot visually. So we did some Simon Says, like, I'm going to do it. Now you're going to go home and do it, or I'm going to do it virtually, then I'm going to watch you do it. And it took a little bit of time, but it was worth it. And then we did some take and bake is what we called it. So we made basically meal kits for these students, and they came and they picked them up and they were able to work in their own kitchens and they would organize themselves. And we got to comment on sanitation in their homes, which was always fun. So making sure things are stored properly and being a little horrified sometimes, but usually not. So it was always interesting to see that. So some types of activities that we did, we focused on really one major skill or lesson per week, and then we did an after action review. So here's what you did, here's what I saw, let's break it down piece by piece. And these are things that can all be done virtually. So they don't need to be done in class. And actually think about it for a second and write it out. So what we hadn't been doing that we're doing more now is we want you to kind of take what you did cognitively and break it down into component steps, and then tell me in each step what you would do differently. And it forces a student to really stop and think about their techniques versus just demonstrating them in the classroom. Okay, so it kind of creates a different level of learning there. The mise en place document that we talked about a second ago, we reviewed the competencies, we created chapter and unit assignments and quizzes, tests, papers, all kinds of things that they could do remotely. Then we aligned all of these to our accreditation needs. So we're accredited by obviously SACS, but also the ACFEF, which is the American Culinary Federation Educational Foundation, and ServSafe. So ServSafe is our sanitation certification that all of our students do. So thankfully, they have that already written out for us. So they have their learning objectives and we can meet those in various ways. So it doesn't have to just be the way that we've always done it. We had an exit ticket. So in order to pass this unit, here are the things you need to do. We need to figure out how to do that. Because a major issue we ran into is a lot of our students have children. And when our school shut down, their school shut down. So now mom and dad don't get to send kid off to school. Now they're having to teach their kids. I had to try to teach my kid trigonometry. Let me tell you how much fun that was. So haven't looked at it in 25 years. Well, our students are in the same boat. So again, Semper Gumby, does it have to be done right now? Not necessarily, as long as we're making it through these units and we're giving those students an opportunity to do that. Pictures, so many pictures, and having students record themselves. And it's always fun to watch yourself on a recording, and I say that very sarcastically. We find some of our most kind of outgoing students are suddenly very shy when they're on video. So it was kind of neat to see that, but let's look at how you're presenting yourself, right? Because part of being a professional is presenting yourself professionally. See more, learn more. We have this idea that we have to teach them everything. And we've realized very, very quickly that with a shutdown like we had, we can't be their only teacher all the time. We just can't. So we had to get over it. And we did bring in some other chefs. We brought in quite a few YouTube videos because there are people out there in professional kitchens with professional lighting and they're professional actors, which we're not, and they can teach these techniques just as well. So it's about the technique, it's not about the chef. And if we're not the ones teaching that technique, there's somebody out there who's very good, who is doing that. And we need to get over the idea that we have to be the ones teaching them everything. And then creating supplemental assignments. So flavor development is always a big thing in culinary, and having students do research on flavor development and then taking a dish that is traditional and making it their own with different flavor development, ethnic backgrounds, seasoning things, cooking things differently to completely change that, and creating kind of signature dishes. As a chef, one of the big things we do is we do not waste food. So whether that waste comes from poor sanitation or that waste comes from throwing it away afterward, we always want to reinvent these foods and we want to make specials out of them. So it's always fun seeing different specials out there, knowing, oh, you didn't want to waste that, so you turned it into something else. And then showing them how that adds to their bottom line. So we do a lot of costing exercises. Anybody can cook, but not everybody can make money doing it. So we want to make sure that we're really focusing on the cost and cost utilization and making sure that we're not wasting things. Allergen awareness, this was the perfect opportunity for us to bring in more about allergens, cross contact, all of the things that we focus on in the classroom, but we may not put quite as much focus on. And of course, we're seeing more and more with allergens and dietary sensitivities. So we were able to include that a little bit more. And then just listen to the students, talk and talk and talk, and let them talk to each other, because they can come up with some really great ideas themselves. The what if, now this is my favorite. The food scientist in me always says, well, what if we do this? And this gave us the opportunity to hand our students a box of food and say, okay, now I want you to come up with some what ifs. So what happens if you change this? What happens if you toast that? What happens if you increase your hydration or increase your mixing time or decrease your cooking temperature, change your cooking method? And we were really able to focus on a lot of the food science that goes on behind that. And so they can really understand ingredient functions, et cetera. So this is a very cheap activity for them because it's staple ingredients. We could send them home with flour and sugar and yeast and say, okay, now we're going to make 6 different things with these. You know, you may add a little butter, you may add a little oil, you may add some spices, but realistically, these very few, very inexpensive ingredients are going to create all of these different things just by changing the way that we do things. And I think they got a lot out of this. Q&A sessions, cook along type things have been very good for us, and just being very collaborative that way. So the big question that we got, how do you taste the food online? And you don't, is the truth of it. You don't taste it. But what you do is you teach students to be able to taste it. And that's really the goal anyway. So I want you to taste that, and I'm going to give you some descriptive words to use. And I'm going to give you flavor wheels. I'm going to give you texture charts. I'm going to give you ways to describe this food. And then I want you to tell me how to make it better, because that's really the goal all along, is I want you to do this when I'm not there. So giving students the tools they need to be able to describe their food and say, okay, well, you're saying it's very flat tasting, you're saying it's very one-dimensional. Well, let's look at ways to build that flavor. Generally something needs a little more umami, right? It's one of those flavor descriptors, or we need to add a little bit of salt to balance out the sour. Okay, and we're really able to show students how to change those products. And then reassigning flavors, et cetera. So we're able to really balance that flavor and have them think about it and actually write it out. So, and it kind of changes the way a student will remember things, because if you just do it, it's a great way to learn, but if you do it and talk about it and write it down, suddenly you're hitting multiple ways to put that into your memory. And it worked out very, very well for us. Those discussion boards were great to sort of kind of kick around ideas. And then, of course, live collaborates. Big thing we focused on through all of this is necessity is the mother of invention. In the beginning, we were all discouraged. Everybody was. Nobody expected this to last this long. But we're getting stronger. And that's really the thing. If we weren't forced to do it, we may not be thinking of the things that we're doing now. So focus on what we can do and focus on all the resources we have available to us. I mean, it takes a village, not just to raise them, but to educate them. So we all know that. We can't be the one and only, and we shouldn't be. So we've been forced to rely on each other. We've been forced to use all of these technological tools that we have available. And we've been forced to kind of change the way we think about things. So it's uncomfortable, but learning is uncomfortable, right? People change when it hurts, and this has hurt, but it's brought around some really good changes for our program.
This has been incredible. There's so much that you packed into this brief session. And I love that while it may have been frustrating at first, it really sparked a lot of creativity. But then one of the things I heard consistently was it actually brought you to focus on even deeper levels of student learning than previous, and allowed you to do more with that learning, and even bring in things that you hadn't covered before. So that's been really exciting to hear. And I think at the core, you've brought it back to the pedagogy and the competencies and what are we doing. And really, you've made it a very simple structure for how to approach making those changes. And I think the instructors will really appreciate all that you've shared. And
I
as
hope
they
so.
listen to it, they'll
Some of
find
these
new
changes
ways.
aren't going away. So
No.
we've actually found some things that, hey, this was a good idea. Why didn't we do this before?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been strange, but I think overall it's been a positive.
Yeah, good things have actually come out of some not so great circumstances, which is really exciting to hear. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I
My
know
pleasure.
that instructors are going to enjoy hearing about this, but also walk away with some ideas and even just encouragement that there's a simplified process to approach that. And I
Mhm.
think they will definitely remember Semper Gumby. I'm gonna remember that
Good.
as
Semper
well.
Gumby. I think that needs to be our 2020 motto. I mean, in hospitality, it's been a motto for a while. Nothing is ever the same, and this is true. We're all hospitality professionals here, and we need to remember that we roll with the punches, and this is it.
Yes,
So,
exactly. So
yeah,
thank you so much for being with us today
my
and sharing
pleasure.
all
Thank
of that.
you.
Well, if you would like to continue the conversation with Chef Kristen, please feel free to reach out to her at kristen.grissom@gvltec.edu. If you have questions you'd like answered or topics you'd like to see covered in the series, let me know at rachel.cobb@gvltec.edu. And also, if you have a teaching tidbit worth sharing, or you know someone who does, please let me know. We want to invite you or them onto the series to share those valuable tips. Well, that's this week's GTC Teaching Tidbit, and we'll see you next time.